Well, welcome to another session. I hope you are well. I'd like to talk about fatigue in today's session. This is another building block on understanding and conquering depression. Let me start with energy because I think fundamentally um, that serves as a building block for diagnosing and finding the cause of either being in a state of depression or feeling depressed or feeling anxious or feeling as though something is not right. Energy is the most important force in the universe. If you go to the scientists and ask them, how do you define energy? Most scientists will generally conclude with the following definition that energy just is. It's the cause and effect of itself. It's evenly present in all places at the same time, and there are laws. There's certain laws that govern the use of energy, how it operates and functions, and more. In today's session, and as I hope you would have gleaned from the prior session, I will be referring to some basic parts of the whole energy question. How do you generate energy? How do you deliver energy once you've generated energy? And more importantly, how do you expend energy? And what happens if you over expend more than you have, which comes to the whole comment about fatigue. Energy is the most powerful force in the universe. So, how we use energy, how we generate energy, use, spend, store energy affects our health and our well being. If you think back in time rather, and just allow your mind to go back and look over the past 800 years as to what we have achieved, irrespective of your, you might say, background or societal um, position, irrespective of where you are geographically, we have made huge improvements by virtue of energy. And here the big question comes then. If primitive man, in other words, the hunter-gatherer man and woman, caveman man and woman, but let me use the word primitive man to speak to all of such people without reference to sex. If primitive man relied on energy heavily, because before such a time, or during such a time rather, we didn't have all the technology that could help us gain much more by spending a lot less. We hadn't developed and understood all the various energy equations and laws and how to conserve energy and how to even multiply the use of the outputs we get from energy. But go back to primitive man. The average man in the cave or average woman in the cave needed energy for survival. During the cold winter spells, you conserved energy because you required so much more energy. The physical body and your environment needed so much more energy for it to have been in a state where your survival was optimum. But as you went through the seasons, went past winter and got into the next season and the next season, energy was needed in order for you to survive, because in order for you to have found food, you had to hunt. You had to chase the wild game. You had to chase sometimes birds. You had to set traps. Food was only available by virtue of what you were able to kill, capture, or acquire. But even more importantly, during those periods, we had people in tribes. So you needed energy, strength, power to be able to withstand an invading tribe, because everybody was looking for a source of sustenance and a source of nourishment. Now, the reason I've come back to this is to simply say we create energy, we release energy, we transmit energy by and through our thoughts, feelings, actions, lifestyles. But at the key part of all of that is the fact that we are what we eat. And what we eat is one of the starting processes through which we create energy. Yes, I understand, and I have said it in sessions past. Yes, man shall not live by bread alone, but man also needs words. I get that. There is a mental, there is a physical, there is a spiritual component to our well-being, and it's all interconnected. But on the physical plane, energy matters. One of the common observations in the West, and let me use Great Britain, the United Kingdom, for example. In the United Kingdom, there's been this very recent, over the past 30, 40 years, recent phenomenon, an observation that most people would agree with, I hope. We are fatigued. We are constantly fatigued. Now, pause that. If you go back 2, 3, 4 generations, let's say to the silent generation or the great generation, one of the things we know is that they had a lot of energy. They had very little technological advancement. They had very little infrastructure. They had very little agricultural development at the time. There was very little progress with regards to healthcare, understanding of the genome and the biome. People died because we didn't have antibiotics. The medical sciences had not advanced well enough in order for us to have worked together with the intelligence that has always existed. But they had more energy. Now, despite currently the technological advancements that we have, the technological advances that we also have, the agricultural advances we have, the infrastructure advances that we are generally, as a people, let me speak to Brits, for example, we are generally fatigued in Britain. We are fatigued, we feel as though we have foggy brains always, and we are desperately lonely. Fatigue is, in the UK, one of the commonest symptoms across all people. Most people are tired. Many years ago, there was a concept called TATT, tired all the time. We have seen a resurgence in that. And for example, in the UK, we since the start of the noughties, call it 1999, roughly less than 25 years, we have doubled our dependence and our consumption in energy drinks. The largest population or group are 10 years to 17-year-olds. They consume more energy drinks than any other group combined. Now, from my recollection, I used to be of the view that the younger you were, the more energy you had. As a matter of fact, young kids run you out because they have so much energy, and that energy stays, and as you move into your 40s, it starts to dwindle, and then you get to your mid-50s, it dwindles even more, but as you approach 80 and 90, you've got very little energy because you're aging. What is happening in the UK, but this applies to the West, is those who are supposed to be in the group with the highest level of natural energy appear to be the ones who need the most energy, support, sustenance, and because they're fatigued. Now, at least you think I'm focusing purely on the young ones. No. Amongst all Brits in Britain, particularly adults, almost 80% of adults consume a minimum of 2 cups of coffee every single day. Most Brits are addicted to coffee. There's a big difference between our consumption of tea, which we generally have because we love it, and our consumption of coffee, because we believe that something is wrong and without it, we cannot function at our optimum level. So what we have is this contrast between the young people drinking a lot of energy drink and the older people relying on energy drinks or caffeine to give them energy. We need the boost. For the typical person, we wake up and we have coffee, the typical adult, first thing in the morning. Some people will tell you that they cannot function without coffee. Think about this. You sleep for 8 hours. The body's supposed to have rested. The moment you wake up, the first thing you want is coffee. The boost, something to get you going, something to take away the fatigue that you feel. Now, this suggests something is not right. If you've slept for 8 hours, surely the body should have nourished itself and replenished and rested, and therefore you should have energy. But for most people, we want coffee. We have coffee and then we have our breakfast, usually very sugar heavy or carb heavy. And then sometime before lunch, we start to dwindle. We need another sugar high. We take another cup of coffee for just before lunch or for lunch. We have another midway through the day. We get back home, and in between we snacked on our sugars and carbohydrates. And in the evening, before we either set off to go home, to make sure when we get back home, we're not fatigued or knackered, we take an energy drink. Sometimes we take that energy drink because we're going to the gym, we need to exercise, we need to meet with friends, but you need something to wake you up and make you feel as though, you're not boring. You want to feel as though you've got that spark and that high and you're ready to go. We're killing ourselves with what I call medication, legal medication, that is concealing the fact that we are fatigued and that something isn't right. And so, as I bring today's session to a close, I would ask you to think about yourself, think about your life. Now, you might be one of those who doesn't necessarily enjoy energy drinks, and you might be one of those who doesn't take coffee, but you might also be the exception to the rule. The focus is not to say those who take energy drinks or those who take coffee should be singled out. The point is that as a society, we are fatigued despite having all the infrastructure, the advancement, the technology, the support system. We're wealthier than we've ever been. We're all individually richer than we've ever been. We're all more educated than we've ever been. We have seen less wars compared to those of history. We're not asked to sacrifice our lives like we used to. We've actually moved up from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the physiological at the bottom, and safety and security. We've moved into the stage of self-esteem, and we're moving to a self-actualization. Yet, we are more fatigued than any other group in history. And the big question is why? Why do we have this energy imbalance? Now, in the session that follows, I am going to talk about this in more detail, but I'll provide you, time permitting, with ways by which you can objectively and subjectively assess yourself to see whether the whole concept of depression and anxiety and fatigue and not feeling happy is linked to the energy equation that your body operates on, that you live by as a person, including your mental state. Now, I hope today's session has been of some value.